CH Extra 2. You are listening at famvetv.info. Bai Jiao was sitting in the last row of the classroom. The teacher on the podium was passionately talking about the bright future of the medical department, inspiring the students who were getting their diplomas that day and would soon be officially working. The teacher spoke for a long time, then finally slowed a little, as the topic turned to the serious matter of receiving a diploma. However, before he could say more than a few words in a calm tone, his voice got excited again. Our medical class 1 graduates this year are particularly great. All of them got their diplomas successfully. As he said that, his eyes bounced around the classroom, and finally landed on Bai Jiao. Here, I would like to give special praise to Bai Jiao, who scored perfect marks in all the assessment items, and is the only student in the past 10 years who has scored perfect marks for the medical department. Bai Jiao smiled lightly. His expression was calm, not arrogant, as if he weren't the one being praised. The students looked back at him with complicated eyes, full of guilt, admiration, envy and other things they had forgotten when they began to isolate Bai Jiao. It seemed that way from the beginning. There were rumors that Bai Jiao was a B-class female beast master and especially fierce. Later the males of class 1, about 3/4 of the students, were ridiculed by other classes and other departments, saying that they were crushed by the females. Initially, some people weren't convinced, and went looking for trouble with Bai Jiao. Bai Jiao's homemade medicine powder easily solved that, which disgraced the big faces in front of the whole school. Since then, Bai Jiao's reputation had grown so much that no one dared to mess with him, and no one dared to go near him. It was rumored that he had many poisons on his body, and would strike at people when he was unhappy, but the reports in recent months had made everyone realize that Bai Jiao didn't seem to be that hard to get close to since he got along well with Xie Sun, Main, and Long Teng, and when they thought about it, except for dealing with people looking for trouble, Bai Jiao had never actually laid a hand on anyone. The teacher complimented Bai Jiao on all fronts, and was still doing so when a cacophony of noises came from outside the classroom. There was the roar of contract beasts, and the excited cries of others. The people in the classroom all turned their heads to look out the window. Bai Jiao, who was sitting closest to the back door, also turned his head and saw a familiar black shadow was flying towards the edge of the school campus. That he stood up abruptly, and ran out of the classroom. A number of people rushed out from the classrooms to the left and right of him, as someone called out, "It's the bulls from the information and combat departments." "What's going on? Did a fight break out? Yo ho, exciting. Does anyone know where the battlefield is?" When Bai Jiao heard them mention the information and combat departments, he thought of Main and Long Teng, then immediately associated that with Xie Senator. He turned right and ran quickly downstairs. The people gathered in the aisles and stairways saw him. They automatically avoided him and gave way, as if they were afraid he would suddenly strike at them. He heard someone mention Xie Senior. He picked up speed. There were a few thick pillars in front of the building, and when he passed them, he would reach the main road of the school. As he passed the pillars, he was stopped by someone. He halted in his tracks and looked at the visitor, his face cold. A male in a black loose sweatshirt, very tall and dark-skinned, stood in front of him. His eyes blazed at Bai Jiao, and his tone was excited. "Bai Jiao, why are you out now? I thought I'd have to wait a while." Bai Jiao ignored him and walked around him, but was stopped again. The black-clad male was a little anxious and angry. "You don't even want to say a word to me. No matter what, we have been alumni from junior high school to college graduation." Bai Jiao looked at him with cold eyes, and spoke in a cold mocking voice, "Alumni." The male averted his eyes and said sharply, "I'm sorry. I really didn't mean it before. I didn't really hate you, I was just angry that you always ignored me. I didn't understand before, but now I understand that I like you." He looked at Bai Jiao once again. "I'm sorry. I don't mind that you're a B-class beast master, and I'm not afraid that you're better than me. If you'll be my mate, I'll treat you well." Bai Jiao's face became even more ugly. "Get lost." The male's brow furrowed abruptly, and his chest rose and fell violently, I know you're angry with me, and that I've ruined your reputation. But I'll marry you and make up for the wrongs I've done. Bai Jiao gave him a disgusted look and turned to walk away. He only got one step when his hand was grabbed by the male. Don't you go. If you don't believe me, I'll go with you now to get a marriage license. Bai Jiao frowned, his other hand went for his spatial pack to get the spray, but before he could take it out, the black-clothed male suddenly let out a miserable scream, toppled to the right and landed on the ground. Ah Jiao, are you all right? Long Teng retracted his fist, as he asked Bai Jiao worriedly. Bai Jiao's expression loosened, and he shook the arm that had just been grabbed. It's fine. Where are Asen and Main? Asen accompanied Main back to the classroom to receive his diploma. Long Teng pointed to the sky. I just saw you when I passed by and came down. The black-clad male got up from the ground, and stared at Long Teng viciously. Long Teng, mind your own business. This is between me and Bai Jiao. It has nothing to do with you. Long Teng stared at him. How can it be unrelated? If you dare make a move against Ah Jiao again, you better believe that I'll knock your teeth out. The black-clothed male gritted his teeth. He knew that he wasn't Long Teng's opponent, and besides Long Teng had always been a person who wasn't used to common sense. Although what he had said was ridiculous, the possibility of him following through was very high. That he looked at Bai Jiao. I'm serious, so think about it. Males are avoiding you. If you don't become my mate, you'll really have to play a bachelor for the rest of your life. Before he could finish his words, he was knocked back by Long Teng's fist. Long Teng's doll-like face was unusually serious, and looked more frightening than a fierce face. He moved extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye gave the other party 4 punches. 2 punches to one side of his face, very symmetrical. The man had a black nosebleed, and his rage returned, causing him to curse violently. The result was he got beaten even worse. No flying contract beast masters could just walk. Before they had rushed out to see the fight and who won. They didn't expect to encounter another fight, then surrounded them to watch with interest what would happen. Good job. Good beating. Haha. It's completely abusive. Ah. The difference in strength is too great. The black-clothed male covered his mouth. His nose was bleeding, he had left a bloody incisor at his feet, his face looked like a dye house, and he was extremely miserable. Long Teng was about to hit him again, when Bai Jiao shouted, "Ateng." Long Teng looked back at him. His expression instantly changed from anger to joy. His smile was still very bright. What's wrong? Bai Jiao looked at that smile, and also smiled a little. Back to class. I haven't gotten my diploma yet. In 3 or 2 steps, Long Teng had popped up at his side. Well, I haven't gotten mine yet either. I'll get it then. Wait for you. Let's have lunch together. Okay. They were both people who didn't care about the opinions of others, so they chatted in front of the crowd of onlookers, and when the two calmly left, the students automatically got out of the way. They left behind the grimacing black-clothed male who was picking up his teeth, and a bunch of spectators. Bai Jiao was the last to get his diploma. When he came out of the classroom, he saw Long Teng was leaning against the corridor wall while he looked at something over his head. Long Teng seemed very focused. His slightly longer usual black hair fell to the ends of his eyes, which added a touch of calmness. It was very different from his usual look. There were 3 females just around the corner who were joking and laughing. Although they were deliberately restrained, Bai Jiao could see that they were looking at Long Teng, and that their occasional shy smile was because of Long Teng. That he didn't know why, but suddenly he was a little irritated. That he sized up Long Teng. The teenager was tall and lean. His orange sweatshirt was particularly bright. He had a standard baby face, which was a little cute and somewhat handsome, and he always had a very pure feeling to him when he looked at people. That appearance, when put together with being an S-class bonded beast master and the Long family's only son, he still seemed to be a very normal person. Bai Jiao's gaze was too obvious, and Long Teng turned his head to look at him. He immediately raised a bright smile, which revealed a mouthful of bright white teeth, and the original hint of quietness disappeared. His whole person was vivid. Long Ting beckoned him joyfully. "Ah Jiao, come quickly. There are ants moving here. So funny." Bai Jiao couldn't help wanting to laugh. He walked towards Long Ting. The three females were still watching. One had covered his face, one had a deflated expression, and the last stared straight at Long Ting with glowing eyes. "It's so powerful. Look. It's carrying something much bigger than it is." Long Ting pointed to the moving ants and exclaimed once Bai Jiao reached him. Bai Jiao looked at the spectacle. An ant's muscles are very efficient and it can produce lots of energy. He laughed. "You are also very powerful, and can also move things heavier than you." Long Ting laughed as well. "Hey, I'm big. Ants are so small and light," he said, then turned towards the stairs. "What do you want to eat?" Bai Jiao was about to reply, when the female with the bright eyes ran over to Long Ting. His face turned red and his voice was very nervous. "Long Ting." I, Long Ting looked at him in confusion. "What's wrong with you?" The female took a deep breath, and said loudly, "I like you. Can you go out with me?" Long Ting was even more confused. "I don't know you. Do you have the wrong person?" He looked at Bai Jiao. "I found a barbecue that's not bad, want to try it?" He easily walked around the female. Then he asked Bai Jiao as they left, his eyes shining, "Want something spicy?" "I still have a chili here, I can have them put it in when they grill the meat." Bai Jiao looked back. The female who confessed was standing frozen while the other two females were comforting him. He looked at Long Ting, and sized him up. "You really think he's mistaken?" Long Ting blinked. "Yeah. Oh, I haven't seen anyone who looks like me at school either, but there must be some kind of misunderstanding. I don't even know him. Besides, I like you." He said this casually, then jumped down the steps in 3 or 2 hops. He turned back and asked with a smile, "You still haven't said what you want to eat." "I'll fix it first, and you can eat it when you get to the restaurant." Bai Jiao recovered from that, "I like you," and said, "Spicy grilled meat." After they left Main and Xia Sen's wedding, Long Ting drove the shuttle and Bai Jiao sat in the passenger seat. Long Ting said excitedly, "Asen said they are going to Sun City for their honeymoon. There are all kinds of lakes of different sizes there. It must be interesting." Bai Jiao said, "It's their honeymoon. We'd better not disturb them." Long Ting, "Then let's both go together. Not with Asen and the others, but you've been doing research since you graduated and you haven't even had a graduation trip, right?" Bai Jiao hesitated slightly and Long Ting immediately said, "It's a deal. We'll go to Sun City for a graduation trip." "Who yeah." There were many lakes in Sun City. 2 of them were Lynching Lake and Forest Lake. Forest Lake was in the inner part of the Rogue Forest. It was a dangerous area, and there were also entry and exit restrictions. Long Ting and Bai Jiao showed their identity information, and left the city without any problems. Then went to Forest Lake. The two sat on the back of the flying dragon beast, as they crossed one forest after another, and passed one lake after another. The air was humid and warm. Long Ting was excited. "Wow, it's much more comfortable than the Star City forest. It's not nearly as hot." Bai Jiao's expression was very relaxed. "Amen, very comfortable. Let's find a place to set up camp first." The flying dragon beast landed on a modest-sized piece of land in the water. The land had a lot of tall trees growing on it, the soil was wet and soft, and once you stepped on it, there was a slight sinking feeling. Long Ting liked it very much, and after putting the tent and sleeping mat in place, he stepped around the tent and stepped on the ground like a child, jumping and dancing happily. Bai Jiao surveyed the surrounding plants, squatted down and looked at the water plants by the lake. He glanced back and saw Long Ting's excitement, and couldn't help but smile as well. His hand moved in the clear lake water, and stirred up tiny water ripples. He felt very relaxed and happy. He was about to withdraw his hand, but when he moved a beat, he was immediately compelled to look at the center of the lake. The lake was clear, but when he squatted and looked along the water, the center of the lake was bright white. He stared at it intently, and found that in the middle of that bright white, there was a touch of unusual silvery white. He stood up abruptly, and saw waves in the water at the center of the lake. The silvery white disappeared, hidden underwater. He subconsciously wanted to chase it, when his waist was suddenly embraced. Long Teng, who was breathing a little sharply, carried him by the waist to the side of the tent, then let go of him. He patted his face and looked back at the lake, apparently surprised. The way you were looking in the water, and you walked right in. Were you really hooked by water ghosts? Bai Jiao was stunned, and stopped smiling. No, then why did you just walk straight into the water? It scared me a little. Long Ting patted his chest. Bai Jiao, I thought you weren't scared of anything. Long Teng, how could that be possible? I just saw you walking towards the water, and my heart instantly jumped to my throat. I was really afraid that you were hurt. He spoke bluntly, and his eyes were pure, with obvious concern. Bai Jiao's heart was moved. He avoided his eyes and looked at the water. I just felt, my contract beast. It probably was in the center of the lake before, but it seems to have realized that I saw it, and ran away. Really? Long Ting jumped up with excitement, craned his neck to look at the center of the lake and saw nothing. Then he remembered, turned back and asked, what is your contract beast? Bai Jiao, white python beast. Wow, it must be beautiful. Long Ting's eyes glowed. The python beast at Asen's place is beautiful, so if it's white, it must be even more beautiful. He said seriously, don't worry. I'll help you find it. For the next 2 days, they traveled around the lake. Bai Jiao could always sense the white python beast, but whenever he glanced its way, it would slip away again. Why is it hiding from you? Long Ting took a tool and worked on planing the center of a large tree trunk. He planned to make his own boat, then go to the center of the lake to find it. Bai Jiao pondered for a moment. Maybe it's studying me. You're so good, you don't need an expedition at all. Long Ting shaved with splinters as he responded naturally. Bai Jiao looked at him, and laughed softly. The wooden boat was well made, and could carry 2 people well enough. As Long Teng and Bai Jiao each held a board, the boat spun in place for a while before they finally were able to paddle correctly. Once the boat was close to the center, Bai Jiao spoke softly, I know you are here. Do you not like me? It's okay if you don't like me, we can get to know each other and be friends. It's okay if we don't make a contract. The flying dragon beast soared in the air above them and let out a soft dragon roar. Half an hour later, the sound of the water at the stern of the boat changed. The two turned around at the same time, and saw a silvery white python who was floating on the water with its head raised, and its silvery eyes looked curiously at them. It's beautiful. Long Ting said in a hushed voice. Bai Jiao was also full of joy. The python's tail swung, and it was as if a white light drifted to Bai Jiao's side. Then it tentatively stretched its head near. Bai Jiao carefully reached out and touched it. The python shrank back, as its body rolled into a flower under the water. It didn't retreat very far, and quietly watched Bai Jiao. Bai Jiao felt its emotions and smiled. If you are willing to make a contract, come with us to the shore. After the boat docked, the white python tossed and turned in the water for a while, then finally came ashore as well. The process of forming the contract wasn't pleasant for Bai Jiao. The white python was a B-class contract beast, which was already a super high grade for a female. Plus this white python, which could survive alone near a forest lake, was very strong, cautious and guarded. After the contract was complete, Bai Jiao immediately fell into a coma, but was caught by Long Teng before he fell to the ground. The moment Long Teng caught Bai Jiao, he became extremely panicked, and then abruptly calmed down. First he carried Bai Jiao to the tent, while he let Big Black calm the white python, and stay outside to guard against danger. He used the clean water from his spatial pack to wet a towel, and wiped the sweat from Bai Jiao's face. Then he took off Bai Jiao's shoes so that Bai Jiao could rest more comfortably. He stood by to guard Bai Jiao. He thought it through, and took out the fruit he had saved in his pack. He put one of each kind of fruit in a long strip next to Bai Jiao's pillow, so the tent was filled with the sweet aroma of fruit. He thought some more, but there was nothing else to do. Bai Jiao was exhausted after making the contract, and he needed to sleep to recover, then he could wake up and eat something. In that way he would recover faster. He sat on the bed and stared at Bai Jiao. The more he looked at him, the better he looked, and his heart liked him. Wet hair was stuck to Bai Jiao's forehead. He bent down while he held his breath to take and carefully moved the wet hair away. Now his bare forehead was free of impurities, and it looked especially smooth. As he got up, his eyes naturally moved downwards. They passed Bai Jiao's delicate eyebrows and beautiful nose, and finally fell on his whitened lips. He inexplicably felt very uncomfortable. If they were wet, would the color be brighter? He wasn't able to control the knot of his throat as it went up and down, and suddenly in his mind emerged an intimate picture. He immediately blushed, red from his cheeks to his ears. He abruptly sat upright, fidgeted, then shifted his position. He fidgeted for a while, but stayed in the same place. He gazed quietly at Bai Jiao. His eyes couldn't help but curl up, and he automatically felt happy. He braced his face in his hand, and was worried. If Jiao knew what he had just thought, would he say he was being a rascal and then ignore him in the future? When Bai Jiao woke up, even before he opened his eyes he smelled the scent of fruit. He opened his eyes, and his view was blocked by Long Ting's smiling face. Jiao, you're awake. The two were so close that Bai Jiao subconsciously shrank back a little. Long Ting asked, are you hungry? Bai Jiao tilted his head, saw the row of fruits, and couldn't help but smile. He sat up. What did you take them all out for? Long Ting pulled back, and sat upright next to him. He pointed to the fruit with a wide smile. This way you could eat when you wake up, you could eat whatever you want. Bai Jiao looked at the long neat line. Have you eaten? Long Ting patted his stomach. Wow, I'm so hungry, I'm really feeling it even if you hadn't said so. He took a knife out of his pack, split the watermelon in half, then brought out 2 spoons and put one on each side. He raised a smile. Just in time for us to eat together. Bai Jiao looked at him, hummed, and took half of the watermelon. Long Ting took the other half and the two walked out of the tent. It was already dark, and the sky was filled with stars. It was beautiful. Long Ting turned on the lighting equipment, then he and Bai Jiao sat side by side to eat the melon. The white python beast swam up to Bai Jiao's feet, and gently touched him. Bai Jiao looked at it, and then looked at Long Ting, and smiled very widely. The two returned to Star City, and first went to Xie Senator in order to allow Bai Jiao and the white python beast to communicate. The white python beast was sent to stay in the accommodation area. Bai Jiao once again fell into a busy schedule where every day was a variety of research. Shortly after he returned, the Institute of Pharmaceutical Research picked out a new area for pharmaceutical research into increasing fertility. All the departments were paying extra attention to that research, and Bai Jiao was the youngest to participate in the project, so he worked very hard. Long Ting started cutting days everywhere, but at least 3 days a week he would look for Bai Jiao. He would wind up late every time, but never forgot to bring some small gifts for Bai Jiao. In addition to the gifts, he would also bring injuries. Bai Jiao bandaged his wounds, and gave him a box of ointment. This is a newly produced trauma medicine. Remember to apply it immediately after the injury. Long Ting sat on the sofa at Bai Jiao's house. He didn't take the ointment, but absently asked, do you not want to treat my wounds? Bai Jiao was stunned. No. Why do you think that? Long Ting said, if I had rubbed the medicine myself, you wouldn't have to treat me. His cheeks puffed out. He looked a little unhappy. They told me so many ways, but only by having you treat my wounds will let me stay with you for a little longer. I don't want to apply the medicine myself. Bai Jiao couldn't help but laugh, and slapped him on the head. Are you a little kid? I'm not, Long Ting retorted unhappily. I'm an adult, and can get married. Bai Jiao, if you want to find me, you don't have to get hurt first. But you are always researching. Long Ting sounded depressed. If I have nothing to do, how can I bother you? You will definitely hate me. No, Bai Jiao said. I won't hate you. I'm supposed to rest after work at night, I just have nothing else to do, so I continue working on my research. Really? Long Ting's eyes lit up, Bai Jiao nodded, really. Long Ting smiled brightly, you are so nice. I like you so much. He gently took Bai Jiao's hand. Will you be my companion? Bai Jiao's heart was beating wildly, and he took a deep breath. Don't joke about that. I'm not joking, Long Ting wasn't happy. I like you, and want you to be my partner. Bai Jiao looked at him. Other than your family, you haven't spoken to any other females besides me and Asen, have you? Long Ting was puzzled, why should I talk to them? Bai Jiao was helpless. Long Ting was like a child, he was curious about everything. He believed Long Ting's words, but he was worried. He was afraid that Long Ting hadn't spent enough time with females and had become momentarily curious about him. The sauce that Asen asked me to help make is ready. Aren't you curious? I'll show you. He changed the subject. The days continued to be busy, but came with a few more changes. Long Ting no longer arrived with injuries-only gifts, and shared with Bai Jiao the fun things he encountered during his bouts. After Long Ting finished challenging all the masters, he said to Bai Jiao, I'm not going to fight, I'm going to open a restaurant. What do you think? His eyes were extremely bright, and it was obvious that he was interested in opening a restaurant. The two of them discussed it, then went to Siasen together to visit Bauer while they discussed cooperation on dishes. Long Ting looked at Bauer. He really liked him, and he also wanted to have a baby. When he heard Siasen's jibe, his first reaction was to look at his stomach, but quickly came back to his senses. He raised the idea of wanting to get married to Bai Jiao again, and was once again diverted by Bai Jiao. Things were talked about and he left with Bai Jiao. Bai Jiao sat in the passenger seat and he sat in the driver's seat, but they didn't move. Bai Jiao was puzzled. What's wrong? Long Ting's chest rose and fell. Eventually he couldn't hold back. He turned around and put his hand against Bai Jiao's shoulder. The two were extremely close, and they could feel each other's breath. He was a little sad. I know that you are deliberately changing the subject. Every time. Even if the first time he didn't really mean to suggest a relationship. After so many times of being put off, he understood. Before Bai Jiao had time to react, Long Ting said again, do you not like me? Do you not want to see me? Are you not happy with me? You don't want to be close to me. Only half of the last word came out, the other half was lost as their lips touched. Long Ting didn't continue to move, just pressed his lips against Bai Jiao's. Bai Jiao's eyes opened slightly. He was surprised and frozen in place. Two people's hearts beat like a drum, and each could hear the other's movements. Half a second later, Long Ting backed away slightly and asked with a red face. Do you hate this? Bai Jiao returned to his senses. He pursed his lips and laughed a little, but his laughter soon deepened again, and finally laughed out loud. In his chagrin, Long Ting tried to get up, but forgot that he was still in the shuttle, and hit his head hard on the roof of the vehicle, because of his strong and abrupt movement. Bai Jiao took his hand, and made him sit down. Then he reached out, and rubbed the top of his head. Reckless. What are you laughing at? Long Ting was confused, and a little embarrassed. Bai Jiao said, you just, he cleared his throat. It's just those words, and actions. Is that something you went somewhere to learn? No. Long Ting scratched the side of his face, and smiled in embarrassment. I just got a little angry, and a little frustrated. I wanted to know your answer. He raised a smile, a bright smile, and his eyes were clear, but it's okay. As long as you aren't married, I won't give up. Anyway, I just like you, and just want to marry you. Bai Jiao smiled, you met a lot of females when you were fighting, right? I see that there is also your back.up association online. You're very popular. Long Ting nodded, yes, there are many females. What's wrong? What do you think of them? Bai Jiao asked. Long Ting was confused, but thought about it. I don't know. I only remember the screams. Bai Jiao lightly laughed as Long Ting asked, do you want to meet them? Do you want to fight them? No, I don't want to. Bai Jiao sighed helplessly, and patted his arm. Let's go. Long Ting did not move. You haven't answered me. Although no matter what, I won't give up, but I still want to know the answer. It would be better if you could tell me what you don't like about me. He said while he smiled, his eyes expectant. Bai Jiao sighed helplessly, if I hated it, I wouldn't still be sitting here talking to you after you kissed me. He laughed a little. Not everything needs to be made clear. Long Ting froze, then his eyes became extremely bright and he hugged him joyfully. Ha ha ha. You like me, right? He added, I like to make things clear, because I'm afraid of getting it wrong. Bai Jiao was affected by his cheerful tone and laughed, well, I do like. Long Ting let go of him after a long hug, and looked at him expectantly. Then when are we going to get married? Bai Jiao, marriage is too fast. Let's fall in love first. He thought back on things, and determined that this was the normal process. After they agreed on their relationship as a couple, Long Ting continued to prepare for the opening of his restaurant, but every day he would come looking for Bai Jiao. From time to time he would bring Xie Sen's newly developed dishes for Bai Jiao to eat, and he watched him eat while his eyes shone brightly. One day, he brought spicy cabbage. When Bai Jiao finished eating it, his lips were spicy red. With his very white skin, it made his lips look more red, and Long Ting didn't hold back and kissed him. The two had zero experience, they went just by instinct as they bumped into each other, which gave it an extra sense of novelty. A simple kiss lasted a long time. When it was over, Long Ting smiled with delight as he held Bai Jiao in his arms. He had his head tilted down while his ears were red under his white hair. Long Ting went home with the wind at his feet. Long Yu took him by the neck. Brat, what bad things did you do? Long Ting had a red face and wouldn't speak, but Long Yu was a man of experience. He looked at his lips and instantly understood. Secretly he thought, how could his son be so pure? It was only a kiss, but he acted like he had ascended to heaven. He patted Long Ting's shoulder. When will you get married? Do you want us to help you choose a date? Long Ting returned from his elation, and said dejectedly, Jiao is reluctant. He says that he isn't getting married now. That he wants to fall in love first. Haven't you guys been talking for a while? Long Yu asked. Have you proposed? Long Ting, propose. I've asked Jiao many times. Long Yu looked disgusted, and began to explain the importance of the proposal to females, then went on to the importance of the form of the proposal, and finally patted Long Ting's head. Go and think about it. Long Ting's eyes glowed, as he excitedly began to think of ways to propose. In order to comply with what was important to the female, he deliberately asked Xie Sen many times. He also looked up a lot of strategies on the Starnet. Finally he saw someone who said that sincerity was the most important part. He thought about it, and quickly made a decision to stop messing around with ideas. On May 20th, he had dinner with Bai Jiao, then drove his shuttle and headed to the topmost floor of the observatory. Bai Jiao smiled. When did you get permission? Long Ting took his hand and laughed. I asked my father for help. Bai Jiao had a guess in his heart, and started to get nervous. He smiled, and didn't say anything more, just followed him to the top floor. The top floor of the observatory was very high. The sky was full of stars, as if you could lift your hand and pick them. Two people were side by side enjoying the night view, when suddenly, all the lights in the building opposite the observatory went dark. Then they began to light up little by little, until they finally spelled out the words, Jiao, I love you. At the moment the words were displayed clearly, Long Ting took Bai Jiao's hand and got down on one knee, as he took out a dark blue velvet box in which 2 rings were placed. Long Ting looked at Bai Jiao, his gaze going from his feet to his eyes. His expression was serious and vaguely nervous. Ah Jiao, be my partner, okay? Bai Jiao tilted his head, wiped away his tears with the back of his hand and nodded. Yes. As soon as Long Ting jumped up, hugged him, and swung him in a circle, there was a thumping sound from the opposite building and gorgeous fireworks bloomed in the air. They were especially colorful and especially beautiful. Long Ting stopped. Bai Jiao looked across at the other building, and couldn't help laughing. You were so sure I would agree. Long Ting shook his head. Not sure at all. If you refused, I would have had to send you home and then enjoy the fireworks alone. Bai Jiao turned his head and buried it in his chest, as he let his tears get hidden in his lapel. Fool! How could I let you watch the fireworks alone? Long Ting was at a loss. Why are you crying? Aren't you happy? I just want to laugh. Bai Jiao sniffled. You are a person with no romantic cells, and of course, you can't think. This marriage proposal, who gave you the idea? Long Ting smiled a little smugly. It was all my own idea. When we went to Sun City, I discovered that you liked the night sky very much. Bai Jiao hugged him and gently laughed. Fool, it's not the night sky that I like. It's when I'm with you. Listen to the full novel at famvetv.info, direct link in the description.